Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the East Penn School District Board of School Directors. Will you please now rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will not be having the EHS Student Government Association report tonight. Our students are staying home for the evening. So we'll move on to requests for address the board. To address the board, I have four. Before I call each individual's name, I'd like to read the following statement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with public comment, speakers should feel free to express their opinion, comment, or question, and understand that this is not an interactive engagement with the board or the administration. Please direct your comments to the chair, be respectful, not engage in profane rhetoric, and be mindful that others, including students, may be listening. I request that you consider that protocol when making your comments. For the members of the audience, please also be respectful and refrain from speaking during the public comment period. With that, I will now announce each speaker and their topic. When you step up to the podium, again state your name, and you will have 3 minutes within which to speak, and I will give you a 10-second warning when your 3 minutes are about to expire. Our first speaker tonight is Ms. Mary Ellen Jackson to talk about Parent Community Group.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me have time to speak this evening. I'm Mary Ellen Jackson. I have two boys at the high school. And at first I would like to mention, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, since the students aren't here, the Stinger edition. I wanted to recognize the work of the students organizing against racism and the Black Student Union articles that are in here. On the first page and the second page talks a lot about the equity plan at the high school and the work that these student groups are doing. So I'd just like to mention that first. Secondly, I wanted to remind folks in this audience and anyone who is on Zoom this evening that there's a group of parents from various schools throughout our school district that have gotten together and are meeting to continue to strengthen the sense of community and commitment to each other through our real-life discussions and stories. And we would like to be considered as a resource for the school administration or the board if there's ever a need for parents to participate on committees or in focus groups or other volunteer activities. Our group is PEEPS, which is Parents for Equity in East Penn Schools. We meet monthly and host community activities so that parents can get together and talk to other parents about their experiences and those of their children. Our group meets to help people build a sense of belonging in the district, to help make sure that all of our students receive a high-quality education in East Penn. We do not have an us versus them mentality. We're in it so that our children can be safe in their schools and so that they can excel. Tonight, I would like to extend an invitation to anyone sitting in this room or on Zoom to join us if you're interested. Please reach out to me here or on Facebook so you can find out more about our future plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jackson. Our next speaker is Mr. Bart Bailey to talk about our collective humanity.
Don't have to be somber, folks. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Good to see everybody. I'll be brief, I promise. But I do want to start with a little bit as we're rounding up Black History Month. This is Black History Month that is set by ASALH as well. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware of ASALH. It's founded in 1914, and many people don't know what it is. But Carter G. Woodson did his work through ASALH. And the Black History theme for this year is Black Resistance. And what I share with folks is that what that means to me is that my joy is part of my resistance. You appreciating my humanity is part of my resistance. And so I'm requesting your listening as we stand here on this Lenni Lenape territory. And I just have a few words. I find it interesting that we live in a community that we struggle to see each other's humanity. And I'm asking the school board and those that are on Zoom and those that are in this room to be very mindful about how fear ignorance, and intimidation affects all of us. I don't care who you are. And in our community right now, we have individuals who have made it their business to use untruths to impact the way we see each other. Last Thursday, we had a group organize and pass out flyers of 5 candidates that are running for the school board that don't want you to talk about diversity, inclusion, or LGBTQ issues. I don't think that's what this community is about. I don't think that's what the values that show up on East Penn School District is about. And so my request of you is to not fear wokeness. I want you to be awake. I want you to see me. I want you to understand my humanity. But we have some individuals that want us to have our heads in the sand. They want to hire kids that can't even speak up for themselves. And they literally said they have challenges finding good workers today. I wonder why. There's nothing wrong with social emotional learning, that kids learn how to process fear, anger, and frustration. But we have a group of individuals that label SEL as something you should not teach children, when many of us grown folks don't even know how to process our own emotions today. So my request of you is to really understand our history of our country, the beauty and the ugliness, all of it together. I prefer that we do not walk around blinded and misinformed and ignorant. I promise you, if we do, history will repeat itself. Please look at York, Pennsylvania. Please look at Cambridge, Maryland.
Sorry, 10 seconds.
We circle around the same issues, and I'm asking you, the playbook is always the same. George Wallace of Alabama picked up the same playbook, and some folks are reusing that same playbook today. Do not allow it to happen here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Our next speaker this evening is Ms. Gab Klotz to talk about general comments.
Thank you for your commentary, Mr. Bailey. I very deeply appreciate it. I'm Gab Klotz. My child is a student in East Penn. I'm commenting tonight simply to thank the board for the budget transparency from the last meeting and for your dedication. I'd also like to thank the East Penn educators who work so hard for all of our children to be included. And the board and the educators are very appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klotz. Our final speaker tonight, I believe, is Jess Denke, to speak about representation in books and in hiring.
Hi. Thanks for your time. I am a librarian at Muhlenberg College, a graduate of Emmaus High School, and I heard a great metaphor when talking about books. And coming off of Black History Month, I thought it might be something to think about and share with y'all. Some books are like mirrors. They allow people to see themselves and their own experiences reflected in the books. Some books are like windows and allow readers to view and learn stories from characters who have a different identity than their own. And some books are like sliding glass doors, when a book goes further than a window and allows readers to use their imagination and walk in a character's shoes. Books are really great learning opportunities for students, but the fastest way that students learn is by observing the reality around them. And that's how we're all conditioned to know what is normal, what excellence looks like. And unless we prioritize diversity in hiring and thinking about putting our resources behind our values, we're not going to show our students what excellence looks like in education. We need to prioritize hiring people who have diversity of ethnicity, diversity of experience, diversity of gender and sexual orientation, and there are excellent candidates for the positions that you have open that would demonstrate the diversity in life. And so I just wanted to encourage you, as you're thinking about the budget, to think about the steps that you're taking in hiring people that will demonstrate the diversity and excellence that we have in our country, and to put the resources and time and energy and money into those searches. We're not going to find the right candidates for our jobs unless we're intentional about it. And so I just want to encourage you in that. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes requests to address the board. Moving on in the agenda, we have the approval of minutes for the February 13th, 2023 regular board meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Miss Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is the district update. Dr. Campbell.
There's been a lot of exciting things happening in East Penn over the past 2 weeks. I'd like to start off by congratulating IR 8th grader Danica De La Cruz. She was the 2023 IR Spelling Bee Championship, which was held at the school level last week. And Danica will now advance and represent IR at the annual Diamond City Regional Spelling Bee coming up in March. Also, on February 11th, several Emmaus High School students who attend LCTI were recognized for their outstanding accomplishments. Seniors Reed Scherer and Christian Roth, again, both seniors at Emmaus High School, attended the Greater Lehigh Valley Auto Dealers Association Automotive Skills Competition. That's a mouthful, held at Northampton Community College. And the team earned a second place finish. Congratulations to both of them. And they also have the potential for earning a scholarship from the Auto Dealers Association. Continuing on the topic of LCTI, as we've shared before, every month LCTI honors students for their outstanding effort or improvement or academic achievement and leadership. And so for the month of January, we're very proud of our Emmaus High School students who were also named as LCTI Students of the Month. Those individuals are Elizabeth Angelino, Austin Eberling, Olivia Grafe, Nathan Oswald, Allison Schwam, and Shannon Yard. We'd also like to recognize the Emmaus High School mock trial team. They participated in the first round of competition during the week of February 6th. Our team won both the trials and advanced to the next phase, and we'd also like to appreciate the leadership of Mr. Brown, who is their student advisor. Early on in February, we also had quite a few Emmaus High School students who participated in the PMEA District 10 band competition. Those individuals are Vivian Zong, Clara Ism, Sophie Ism, Julia McDonald, Jamie Kale, and Zach Bernhard. And both Vivian and Julia will be moving on to the regional band competition that's coming up next month in March. We'd also like to recognize our junior high wrestling team. They had an outstanding showing at junior high districts. Specifically, we had several wrestlers and who placed within the top 8, and the team placed 4th overall. Just this past weekend was an exciting weekend as well for many in the East Penn community. I'd like to thank everyone who was able to come out on Saturday and enjoy the International Fair, which is an event that has been held at Emmaus High School for several years now. We took a little break due to COVID, so it was fantastic to see so many students, staff, and families who came out on Saturday to educate and celebrate the diversity and the rich cultures that make us who we are in East Penn. Also, yesterday on Sunday, we had several EHS athletes who participated in the state competition for winter track and field that was held at Penn State University. Congratulations to our athletes who represented Emmaus, including Haley Reinhard, who ran the mile, Addison Johnson, Peyton Campbell, Maddie McCartney, and Addie Kleinley, who participated in the 4x800 meter relay. We had 2 students from Emmaus High School who competed in the state championship for pole vault. Those are Aiden Herbert and Tyler Gerbinski. We also had Josiah Banks, who participated in long jump, and Kyle Moore, who competed in long jump and triple jump. And we are thrilled to share that Kyle Moore is the second place champion in the state for the long jump. So very proud of our athletes and look forward to seeing them continue this spring at the track and field. Recently, we also had several Emmaus High School students who were given the prestigious congressional nominations for their application to several military academies. Susan Wild offered her support to Sam Dalton, who is applying to the Air Force Academy. Daniel Merck earned an impressive nomination for the Military Academy at West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and the Merchant Marine Academy, whichever he might choose. And Maddie Woodward also received the nomination for West Point. So congratulations to those EHS seniors as well. We have some exciting upcoming events in the district. Tickets are on sale for the Iyer Spring Musical, Singin' in the Rain Juniors. The shows begin later this week, March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Held at Iyer. Tickets, the ticket order form can be found on the school website, so please be sure to check it out. As a reminder as well, students from our Jasper Learning Program will be showing off their outstanding tech skills coming up on March 4th at the Snow Blast Winter Arts Festival held in Emmaus. You might recall, I shared this before, our Jasper 9th grade students partnered with JuxtaHub, Emmaus Main Street Partners, and about 20 local businesses to create a gnome-themed augmented reality experience. So if you have a chance, check it out on March 4th on the Triangle. Also, I'd like to share with everyone, this is a reminder that our East Penn Education Foundation, in conjunction with our high school counseling department, will be offering its annual career exploration fair. That's open to all Lehigh Valley students and families on Tuesday, March 28th, here at Emmaus High School from 6 to 8 p.m. This is a great opportunity, if there are any local businesses who are listening tonight, to consider joining us as a sponsor and or an exhibitor at the career fair. And it really is a fantastic opportunity for all of our students to join us and just learn more about career options and speak directly with people who are in the field. This is a reminder as well for any community members in East Penn that if you have a child who is coming of school age, meaning they will be 5 by September 1st of 2023. We are really excited to welcome our 5-year-olds to kindergarten in the East Penn School District. And starting March 1st, 2023, so later this week, our online registration will open for kindergarten registration. So all you have to do is check out the district website or each of our building websites to begin that process. We'd also like to begin to recognize some of the outstanding seniors who will be graduating in 2023 of this year. And so specifically, we are again returning to our grad spotlight program. If you have a graduating senior or someone you know who's a graduating senior and you'd like to nominate them for the grad spotlight, please consider checking out the application process, I should say the nomination process, which is available on both the district and the high school website. Nominations are accepted now through March 15th, so you have about 2 weeks to do that yet. We have so many amazing students at Emmaus High School, and there really are so many reasons that you might consider nominating a student, whether it's for their outstanding academic achievement, athletic achievement, community service, or some unique skill or talent that they contribute to the East Penn community. So please consider nominating a senior. Speaking of seniors, as we look forward to the spring, although we're supposed to have winter weather this week, we also start to think about our grad side program. The East Penn Education Foundation is sponsoring our grad signs for our graduating seniors this spring. Cost is $25. The sale ends on May 15th, so you have a little bit of time, but don't forget to honor a graduate with our senior signs. And also new this year, we are also offering signs to celebrate our 8th graders who are quote-unquote graduating from Eyre and Lower Macungie Middle School this year. So please also consider supporting the East Penn Education Foundation and our students with a senior or 8th grade grad sign. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any comments or questions from the board? I will add one thing. I did attend the International Fair this past Saturday, and I share the same observations. Very enthusiastic that this was brought back. I had a great time looking at all the displays that the students had prepared. It was great to see students, family members, teachers, and other members of the community visit. And even there were some dancing and some bagpipe demonstrations and whatnot. But it was really nice to see that return and look forward to having it again next year. Okay, if there are no further comments, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, on the budget. We're going to get the 23-24 budget expenditure overview. Dr. Campbell, would you like to introduce?
So as Mr. Saul finds his comfortable spot at the podium, just to very briefly introduce, this is our third series of, or I should say our third of a series of mini budget presentations. At our first presentation back in January, we provided a high-level overview of the Act 1 index. At our first February meeting, we provided an overview of district revenues, and now tonight we're going to take a dive into district expenditures. And so as a reminder, our goal throughout the remainder of the spring season would be that we hit upon various aspects of the district budget so that by the time that we get to June, the board and the community has a very detailed overview of the school district budget that we are proposing for the 23-24 school year that ultimately meets those priorities that we have in the organization. And so at this point, I'll turn things over to Mr. Saul.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll just dive right into the summary of expenses part of the presentation. I did print 2 pages to distribute to the board since the presentation wasn't available to you in advance. I thought it would be helpful to have these 2 pages to follow along as we proceed through the presentation. We've identified 13 areas where the expenses will increase even while maintaining the existing program for the next year. These areas include, and you can see them listed here, wages, group insurances, which relate to employee benefit insurances, Social Security payments, retirement contributions, workers' compensation, educational alternatives, which is related to VESPA, facilities, specifically electricity and natural gas utilities, special education, curriculum materials, charter and cyber school tuition, LCTI contributions, property, liability, and cyber insurance, and transportation. The increase in these 13 areas account for $8.3 million of the proposed increase alone. And again, we'll review these in greater detail. The other expenditure category we see here includes items not captured in the above categories. Those things would include things like our building budgets, the department budgets that weren't specifically called out here, tuition reimbursement for employees, LTRIC tuition, attorney fees, audit fees, SRO cost, tax collection cost, non-federal grants, our assessment for the IU, debt service, and capital reserve contributions. That's just to give you an idea of the things that would fall into the other category. The final three items we see here, budgetary reserve, the ESSER offset fund expenditures, and district priorities, we will not be reviewing this evening because those will be called out in future budget presentations. Just one housekeeping note, the following areas, educational alternatives, facilities, special education, and curriculum materials, represent the total departmental budget for these departments, including wages and benefits. So if you look, for instance, at the utilities or the facilities, we're calling out the utility part of the increase, but what you see there is the total departmental budget. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is go through those 13 areas and just give a little explanation of each of those and the increases. The wage category is comprised of the job classifications you see listed on this slide. The wage increases for a majority of employees are defined in collective bargaining agreements, and the increases for 2023-24 range from 3% to 4%. The composite increase, as you could see on the summary page, is $2.6 million, or 3.6%. With regard to group insurances, the increase in this category is primarily related to the medical premium increase, which will be 11% for 23-24. I like to take this opportunity annually to, during this presentation, to remind the board that East Penn School District participates with 10 other Lehigh County educational entities in a health benefits consortium to leverage our purchasing power to negotiate favorable pricing on our medical and prescription benefit programs. Currently, the Health Benefits Consortium that we participate in has 4,240 subscribers, which covers 11,400 lives within the county. By leveraging our pooled buying power, 98.5 cents of every premium dollar that we send to Highmark is spent on actual medical claim costs, and only 1.5 cents is administrative overhead, which I would challenge anybody to find a healthcare plan that functions that efficiently. Slide 6 displays the medical insurance premium changes over the last 13 years. In addition to our very low administrative cost, our consortium also has an annual settlement feature where the premium contributions that are not spent on claims or administrative fees is set aside into a rate stabilization fund. That fund, that rate stabilization fund, or like a fund balance that we have, can be used to mitigate increases in certain years. And by doing that, you can see over the last 13 years, the average healthcare increase has been under 5%. On the next slide, we can see that rate stabilization fund that I just described and the use of it over the past 10 years. So from 2013 to 2017, you can see that it increased considerably. That was because during those years, we were using Highmark's book of business trend factors, which we discovered were Highmark's book of business trends higher than our consortium trend. So in 2017-18, we started using the consortium-specific trend, but at the same time, we started suppressing the premium to use some of the rate stabilization fund. Again, why we saw some very low years in terms of premium increase. That suppression was discontinued in the current year, 22-23, when we reached 2 months of premium on hand, which is sort of the preferred/required amount of premium on hand from Highmark. What that means is the 12% increase in the current year and the 11% increase for next year represents the full increase required to pay healthcare claims in our insurance plan. The consortium's specific trend that I referenced is 8.5%. So what that means is annually, we should plan on a minimum of an 8.5% increase in health insurance claim costs or premium costs. The next area listed on the, of those 13 areas is Social Security payments. Very simply, Social Security payments are a percentage of payroll. Therefore, the increase is due to the increase in wages for next year. While the budget increase for retirement contributions is negligible for the coming year, 23-24, it's an area that we have seen significant increases over the past decade, so I feel like it continues to be worthy of a brief overview. The graph on this slide, which has been shared with the board in the past, has been updated with the new projected employer contribution rates. But like Social Security payments, retirement contributions are a percent of wage expenses. For next year, the mandatory employer contribution rate is actually decreasing, and I think I discussed that with the board previously. It's a 3.6% decrease to 34% of wage expenses. You can see, though, that this appears to be a one year of relief as the future years are projected to increase. The next item you'll see on the list is workers' compensation. The amount budgeted for workers' compensation is an early estimate of our potential increase. You may recall from previous years that when we actually have our final renewal in May, we'll make an adjustment to the budget for the actual premium expense for next year. The increase for educational alternatives, which you can see on this slide here, is twofold. It includes a very small amount to establish a department budget for the Director of Educational Alternatives. You'll recall that was a new position that we added this year, and so we're trying to build a departmental budget. The other majority of the increase is for the VESPA program expenses. On this slide, we can see that in 22-23, the current year, the budget was set based on the 2020-21 actual expenditures, due to the timing of the invoices that come in. However, the anticipated actual costs at this point are estimated to far exceed the budgeted number. While the budget is increasing, the reality is, while the budget is increasing for next year, you can see it really is closely reflects or mirrors the actual expense for this year. So while it seems like a significant increase, if we look at the actual expenses and the actual projected for the current year, you can see that it's really not far off from where we have been. With regard to facilities, I had mentioned that this is related to the electricity and natural gas. Again, the budget amount here reflects the total facilities budget and does not include wages and benefits. The $800,000 increase for 23-24 is related to the utility costs. The district engages in multi-year fixed price agreements for the purchase of electricity and natural gas. The agreements that are currently in place expire at the end of the current year. Again, they've been in place for a few years and now will expire. During the term that they've been in place, we've seen significant increases, not the district, but if you look at in the community and marketplace, there have been significant increases in the cost of electricity and natural gas. Therefore, we're seeing the cumulative effect of this in our increase for next year. There is a little good news with regard to this. We have actually marketed our electricity utilization and engaged in an electricity contract that the price is less than what we had anticipated when we budgeted. So there will be some decrease in this budget amount the next time we revise the budget. Slide 11 displays the multi-year trends for special education costs, including the $823,000 increase for 2023-2024. A portion of the increased special education expenditures is to provide enhanced behavioral supports through registered behavior specialists for some students in our autistic program, specifically to maintain these students in their least restrictive environment in our special education classrooms. The other portion of the increase is related or is to provide financial support for special education students needing an alternative educational setting outside of the district to address their complex learning and mental health needs. The next item, which I don't have a slide for, is curriculum materials for existing programs. The $115,000 increase related to curriculum materials is related to curriculum materials for existing programs related to the cost escalation for existing educational programming, such as Ready Classroom Mathematics. It also includes the movement of other programming from the temporary ESSER funding to a more permanent place in the district budget. So there were some things that we wanted to test using the ESSER funding and have found those to be, I'm going to use the word successful. I'm not sure if I should be using that term. But we have found that we want to move those to make them more permanent in the budget. With regard to the charter and cyber school tuition, slide 12 displays the trends for charter and cyber school tuition expenses. We can observe the enrollment spike that occurred in the 2021 school year related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the subsequent decrease. The 22-23 budget anticipated a small increase, but our revised budget projections indicate the actual expenses will be higher than we had originally budgeted. And then the 23-24 budget contemplates a continued increase beyond the current year. Slide 13 contains a table that displays the annual charter and cyber enrollment, as well as the tuition rates for the regular education and special education students. As noted at the bottom of the slide, our annual cost of tuition is a composite of the two components, the enrollment and the tuition rate. With regard to LCTI, the tuition is based on the budget estimates that are provided by LCTI. And actually, the information is also contained in the budget that is included on this evening's agenda for your consideration. So we take this directly from the information provided to us by LCTI. With regard to property, liability, and cyber insurance, the $66,000 increase in this insurance line item is primarily related to increases in cyber liability insurance coverage. The increased global reliance on the internet that occurred during the pandemic has yielded significant increases in cybercrime. And for this reason, liability insurers have both increased their requirements for computer safety and security. So we have made significant investments in terms of our networks, as well as increased insurance premiums to account for the increased risk that are being seen. For transportation, the $491,000 increase in transportation is the result of the 3% increase that's contained in our current pupil transportation contract. That's an annual increase, as well as the addition of school bus runs during the current school year. As we reviewed previously, a need was identified at the beginning of the school year for additional runs to LCTI. These runs were added, and we used ESSER funds to pay for those in the current year. But those are anticipated to be ongoing, and so we're moving them again to the regular transportation budget. Under other expenses, I just wanted to take a few minutes to highlight debt service and transfers to capital reserve. Again, this is sort of outside of those 13 items that are really contributing to the increases, but this is something we tend to talk about annually at this time. And I think with the facilities work that we're doing presently, it's good to have this as a refresher. So on slide 17, it shows our current debt service obligations. On this chart, the entire bar represents the debt service amount that we pay, and the yellow portion of the bar represents the reimbursement from the Commonwealth for the Plan-Con reimbursement program. Therefore, the green part of the bar is our net cost for debt service. As you can see, our debt service steps down over the next year or two and then levels off for about 4 years. And then actually our debt service would all be paid off in 2029, 2030. What we have, the strategy that we have employed, you may recall, is that as each time this steps down, we have redirected that additional, I'll call that additional capacity, to our capital reserve fund. And so you can see here the increase to capital reserve fund. And by doing that, what we've done is we have preserved the capacity within our budget to incur future debt and be able to make those debt payments without increasing taxes. And this, hopefully, the importance of this strategy is becoming a little more evident as our facilities inquiry teams meet and discuss our infrastructure needs and are identifying things and recognizing the cost of some of the things that are being identified. I wanted to just take a second to talk about budgetary reserve. So if you're following along on the sheet that I passed around, budgetary reserve is listed there. With regard to budgetary reserve, it's been maintained at 5% of the anticipated expenditures for the past several years. So that's what it was adjusted to for 23-24. This increase has very little impact on the budget as a whole, because what we do is we back out budgetary reserve to evaluate our anticipated expenditures when we look at our bottom line. So while it is an increase in terms of expenditures, we'll back it out, and we'll see that in just a minute, and I'll highlight that. Again, I mentioned that with regard to budget priorities and the ESSER funds, we'll review those again, or we will review those at a future presentation. So what I'd like to do is take the information from the the presentation at the last board meeting, the revenues, and what we just covered this evening, the expenditures, and sort of bring it together and summarize. So I'm going to go down the column labeled the 2023-24 budget. You'll recall that last time we anticipated $176 million worth of revenues. This evening, and at the bottom of the sheet that you have, the total expenditures are $188 million. As I said a few minutes ago, what we do is we back out the budgetary reserve to evaluate our anticipated expenditures, which would be $178 million. We compare the total revenues to the anticipated expenditures, and we have a roughly $3 million deficit. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. We're anticipating at this point that our beginning balance would be roughly $23.5 million. You take off the $3 million deficit, the ending fund balance would be a little over $21 million. I'd like to add a quick supplement to this evening's expenditure presentation regarding fund balance. In the wake of the Auditor General's January 2023 performance audit on applying for referendum exceptions, designating funds, and increasing taxes, there seems to be an increased interest in the fund balance topic. So I included the breakdown below and just want to touch on it briefly. Also in this presentation, for your future reference, I put fund balance definitions at the end. So if you want to go back and look at those at some point, they're available. So if we go down below, you can see that the total ending fund balance is now broken down into the various components. The restricted fund balance is monies held in by the school district in trust, including things such as the memorial awards. So we've had individuals give award monies, and you've approved some of those, that we hold in trust and then distribute per their request at graduation. And so those are considered restricted funds because we don't have the ability to use those as we wish. We have to use those as designated by the grantor. Committed funds are monies that are set aside for a specific purpose by resolution of the board. So in our case, these are the ESSER offset funds. So last year, when we adopted the budget, you adopted a resolution that indicated how much would be set aside and how those monies would be used. So while we're on this, I just wanted to touch on this. Remember, there was a $3 million deficit. What that is that's the use of the ESSER offset funds. So if we look at the committed fund balance in the 22-23 column of 3.3 million, and then we subtract the 2.89 million, it should come out to roughly the 1.172 million. So again, that committed fund is the ESSER offset fund balance that we've been carrying, and that's the use of those funds. The assigned fund balance for us is the amount the expenditures are anticipated to exceed revenues in the following fiscal year, so in 24-25. So that our long-range plan comes in really handy for anticipating what that amount might be. And the reason you do that is if your expenditures are going to exceed your revenues, you need to have an assigned fund balance to cover that in the event that you would spend it out, if that makes sense. And then finally is the unassigned fund balance. The unassigned fund balance are funds that have not been designated for a specific purpose or have not been listed in the categories above. They're often used to meet cash flow needs or to finance monthly operations, especially in the summer months when cash flows are slower. You'll recall when we talked about the revenues last time, the flow of our real estate taxes is that they tend to come in at the end of August. So we have to really have a fund balance to carry us through that period of like June, July, August when we see slower revenues. The total projected fund balance is 11.9% of anticipated expenditures, or approximately 1.4 months of operating costs. This is reasonable for East Penn, but certainly is notably below the 2 months of operating expenditures recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's. Again, we have been operating with the fund balance at that level, and I think we'll be fine. But I think it's prudent to point out that the targets that are set by outside organizations are higher. And with that, Mr. President, that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saul. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Byrd?
I have a couple of comments. I'd like to go back to the charter school, cyber school slide, and maybe talk a little bit about that, how that number has been driven. I think you talked this by cost and also the number of students. Okay.
Yeah, so our annual total cost is the product of the enrollment, right? So the enrollment broken down by regular ed student and special ed student, and then multiplied by the tuition rate. And you can see the tuition rates there for all of those years and the differential between the regular student rate and the special education student rate.
So our rates are increasing on the sides for both special and regular students.
Yeah, so
Tremendously.
yeah, so each school district or local education association agency, local education agency, their charter tuition rate is based on their budgeted costs for that year. So as our budget expenses go up, our tuition rate goes up.
I guess another question, as we have some students increasing, I guess that number seemed to be increasing also, which also reflected also the numbers with the increasing cost. You have two or three drivers that are driving that number.
Correct.
I guess so we're probably, about 7-8 million? And a few years ago, we were about 3 or 4 million. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Yes, that looks accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, so before you backed out all of the offsets, there was the 11.2 million in increases. And then you backed out a whole host of things, but it was kind of hard to follow, especially because we don't have access to what you're showing.
Sure. So,
Could you just list them all for me, everything that you subtracted out to get to the 1.72 million? Or maybe you didn't get to 1.72 million.
The 1.78 million?
78.
Yeah, so the only thing that was backed out is the budgetary reserve.
Okay. And I thought you'd subtracted ESSER funds and some other things too, no?
No. So if we follow this, maybe I can offer this information. If we follow this calculation and follow the 2023-24 column, again, you have the revenues less the anticipated expenditures, right, because we backed out the budgetary reserve, leaves a deficit of $3 million. And the reason for that is we're spending that from our fund balance because the fund balance is where the ESSER offset funds are being held
Okay.
to be used.
Are we, in this scenario, using ESSER offset funds to pay for increases in wages and healthcare?
No.
Okay. Can you
The-
explain how we're not doing that? That's where I got lost.
Okay, so the ESSER offset funds are monies that we set aside to be used to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on student learning. You need to recall that they're one-time funds, right? We set aside a set amount. And so the first thing is that we indicated we're going to use them for that specific purpose. The second thing is to use them for wage increases or healthcare increases would just be creating a bigger hole in a future year.
Yeah, that's what I had understood. So, right now, as of what you're suggesting, obviously, without all of the tweaking that goes on between now and June, we're looking at a shortfall of 1 point something. You said 178. Is that right?
No. If you consider the ESSER offset funds, it's actually a balanced budget. So there's not a shortfall at this point.
And even when you add in the priorities, so everything added together, this is balanced, but you're including the a tax increase.
3.9%,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Jankowski.
Back on the slide regarding the charter cyber schools with the enrollment, why did you keep it stable at 475 when there's been a trend? I mean, there was a huge increase in 2021 and then it dropped, but then there's been a trend over the last couple of years. Why are you not projecting an increase in enrollment for next year?
Well, and I can see what you're saying about over the last couple of years. Let me just point out that the last three columns, the first, so 22, 23, that's the budget for the current year. So we used
Okay,
460,
then it's the
right?
revised budget.
So then it's, the 470. So there's really not it's hard to establish a trend, in my opinion, when you have 481, 452 as your actual, and now we're at 475. So yes, it could go up. It may not go up. Like,
That's fair.
does that make sense?
Yeah. Nope. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Any other question? Mr. Champagne?
Yes, as always, thank you, Mr. Saul. Could you go back to VESPA and let me understand why we budgeted 300,000 and we're anticipating expenditures on the order of what you budgeted for 23-24. So what happened between the budget expenditures and then the actuals? What was the reason?
Yeah, so I think you're asking about the third column from the end and the second column from the end, right? The short one and then the long one beside it in gray.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the very transparent, honest answer is we didn't have a person in a position whose sole responsibility it was. This was an area of shared responsibility previously. And so, we looked at what was the actual expenses for the most recent year, and at that point, it would have been 2021, and we benchmarked off that. We now have a person in that role to look at this and project these numbers, but
But I thought that was one of the categories that wages and benefits were not included. Did I miss something here, or? So when you say we now have
Yeah,
a
so
person in a role here, so is these expenditures outside of their wages and
benefits that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think what maybe I need to clarify is Vespa, for the most part, is a program we purchased from the IU. So we don't employ a group of teachers with salaries and benefits for this,
Right.
right? And so this, what we're looking at, represents the billing from the intermediate unit for the what they call their eLearn 21 program, which we rebrand as Vespa.
Okay,
And if
so
I could just also add, not to interrupt, but just to bring some clarity, I think when Mr. Saul was referring to having a person in the role, we now have a director of ed alternatives, and one of the leader's responsibilities is leading the VESPA program. And so I think he was speaking to now very careful attention to VESPA enrollment, programming costs, et cetera.
Okay, so that's what I
that-
thought.
was that-
but
Yes, thank you for saying all the words that my
Yeah.
mind thought and jumped over.
I didn't know
Yes.
why the expenditure increased. So this is really just costs, as we see the program that we need to provide to students, the IU says this is what's going to cost you.
Yeah, this is a more accurate budgeting for what we had been spending for the program.
Yes.
So this is really, I wouldn't say it's out of our control, but it somewhat is because the IU sets the rate.
It's the rate, but again, sort of like we talked with some other items, and the number of students enrolled.
Right.
Right, so as we see more students enroll in our district program, the cost
What are we
goes up.
projecting in terms of enrollment for that program? Is that another driver in why the budget is going up?
It's the enrollment and the IU cost, that's correct.
Do you know what the projected,
I don't have that information at hand, and we probably could get it,
I'm
and
just curious to see if it's being better utilized or more students are in, so that would be a driver for expenditures, so.
I think we can give you a general sense of our enrollment from
thank you.
Ms.
I didn't-
Carolla.
I didn't want to put anybody
Yep.
on the spot without having
We
their.
were prepared, yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I can give you an update on the numbers. Right now, we are currently K-12 with 179 enrollments in our VESPA program. If you break that out, I looked at data from last year, which I could find secondary data at the high school level. We ended in April with our VESPA program with 159 students. At the high school level now, we're at 144. So I would project that we'll end somewhere over that 159, but not by too much. And then I went further and I broke down the cyber charter enrollments. So the data that you saw this evening combined both charter and cyber charter. I took out the regular charter programs. And this data is as of late October. I don't have the update, but we currently have about 184 students K-12 placed cyber charter. So this spring, we'll do an intentional campaign to try to bring back some of those students to our district in a hope of decreasing the cost of the cyber charter payments. Obviously, that would increase the cost of our VESPA payments, but we could be much more cost effective if we were doing it in-house.
So the balance of that 475, you subtract the 184 are in brick and mortar charter.
Based on a very rough estimate when I looked at the numbers, and again, this data is a little bit outdated because it's about 4 months old.
All right, thank you. On transportation, you said that was driven by primarily the contract. What about fuel?
That's a great question. In terms of fuel, very different from our facilities utility costs. We have typically used a year-to-year propane contract, not a multi-year. And so our propane costs, we have locked in for next year, and they are actually lower than our current year costs. So we actually saw a decrease in that area.
And with respect to insurance, just in general, I mean, what mitigations can we look at to, I mean, those increases are pretty steep. Is there any, I mean, we're looking at coverage limits, deductibles, what are we?
I think with regard to the cyber, because that's what's really driving it, and let me back up a minute. These are estimates for next year, and when we get actual renewal rates in May, like the workers' compensation, we will bring those back and put those in the budget. So they certainly could be scaled back because we make opposite of conservative, liberal, if you will, estimate
Right.
at this point. The cyber is really what's driving this. We've done a number of mitigation things, which I'll be very honest with you, I would prefer not to discuss here in the public because of the sensitivity with cyber crime and those things.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Additional questions? Mr. Smith?
Thank you. It's not really a question, just something to put on everybody's radar. In talking about the increase in cost of VESPA and the cyber school tuition and those increases coming through, it reminded me of something I saw recently. There was a Senate Bill 337 that was proposed in December by Senator Schwenk. And basically, the gist of the bill was that to have the funding for cyber schools mirror what is already in place for brick and mortar, whereas if the district is able to provide the same scope and content in a cyber program, the district would not be responsible for the tuition costs of that cyber school. It's the same way it's done currently, like with 7th Gen, for example. We don't have that same scope and content that they do, so we were responsible for the payments to them. But if we were somehow able to build it into our curriculum, then we wouldn't have to. That's currently not the way that it's set up to fund cyber school charter cyber schools. So as we're looking at increasing the costs of VESPA and talking about bringing people in, there's a Senate bill out there, it's 337 again, that is looking to make the funding a more equal playing field compared to the brick and mortar. So not necessarily tied to this presentation exactly, but since we're on that topic, I appreciate the conversation tonight, but I wanted to put that out there on everybody's radars as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Anything else? Mr. Byrd?
I have just a comment about the cider schools and charter schools. Talked about bringing students back. I guess it's probably not the proper form, but are we doing anything to prevent schools or keep our students from going to charter schools? Are we giving them proper education and what their needs? Are we meeting their needs? So we don't have to work and bringing them back. Let's keep them here. So any programs like that we're working on in the district?
I can speak to the VESPA program. We've really been very intentional this year about why are students choosing VESPA and leaving our brick and mortar buildings, and how can we help them feel more of a sense of a connection to our district and our community. So we've been very purposeful in creating an environment where they feel included and a part of something, and because we all know relationships and connections are typically what keep people connected and feeling valued. So to date, I could tell you we have down the hallway here a VESPA room. We have a VESPA room both at the secondary and the elementary level, where we invite students in who are in our cyber programs to come and work with some academic support teachers if they need extra help face-to-face. We have VESPA advisors both at the secondary and elementary level. And at the secondary level, we have had over 325 visits, student visits to the classroom this year alone. Out of those visits, 75 unique students have accessed it. So we are really kind of trying to create a community where students, for whatever reason, chose this alternate option for their education, but they're still getting the same quality of excellence that they would get in the brick and mortar, but we're meeting their needs in different ways. We've also, K-12, introduced some community VESPA events where we've invited the families and the students. We did a pumpkin palooza in the fall. In the winter, we did a winter blitz, and then we'll have another event in the spring and an end of year. So we've invited those families to come, connect with one another, as well as the students to connect with one another. So through some of these initiatives and this intentional work with helping people feel a part of it, we hope that we'll continue to keep our families in district feeling like, while whatever their needs weren't being met in brick and mortar, we can do that in an alternative or a different way.
One question when I talked about that, What about the brick and mortar side, as students evacuate our district? What programs do you have working on that?
Well, so interestingly enough, we have done, and I'll speak a little bit, I won't belabor this presentation, but about our STEP and our transition rooms. We have found a beautiful marriage this year between some of our VESPA students and our STEP students. So some students who have migrated to VESPA because of issues that they are barriers that they might have been experiencing, that they weren't finding success in the building. My role in being able to oversee both, we've recognized that maybe the virtual setting really wasn't the appropriate placement, but how could we remove those barriers to get them back into the building? So we have transitioned them back through our STEP classrooms in the secondary buildings, and we have found tremendous success. Sometimes students choose a virtual program because of school anxiety or other mental health components, and through the highly supportive environment of the STEP classroom, we can deliver the strategies and the coping mechanisms that they need, and then give them the confidence to slowly reintegrate themselves into the buildings, the actual brick and mortar buildings, feeling like they have a support system around them and feeling better about where they are academically speaking. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but because of those programs in brick and mortar, those STEP classrooms, that has been a tremendous gateway for us to return some of our virtual students who really should stay in the building, but for whatever reason, those barriers were inhibiting them from finding success, been able to deliver that level of intervention to keep them there.
Do you have data that drive the root cause of why students leave our district to go to brick and mortar and cyber schools? Do you have data of done any work in that area?
So one of the things that we do when our students enroll in our virtual program is we just ask. It's a very informal survey. Mostly we use it for getting to know you kind of purposes, but we do ask our students, why are you choosing? Some of the more common reasons are anxiety, mental health, peer issues. Some students feel that they want more time to work in the community, or they have other responsibilities that they want a more flexible learning plan. We have some athletes who train intensively who need a more flexible learning plan. But I would say some of the more frequent reasoning is because there tends to be some level of disconnect between what they're feeling in the building, and it causes anxiety or frustration with the programming. So I think that as we uncover all of this, and that's been the beauty of this, is as we uncover all of this data, those conversations with brick and mortar are happening because we recognize we want to make sure we're creating an environment, brick and mortar, where everybody feels like they belong. Not everybody will choose that sense of belonging, which is why these educational alternatives are important, but we want to make sure that everybody feels valued in both settings.
I appreciate that work because that's very important. That's 11% increase in our budget. That's quite a big number. If we can drive that down anyway, we appreciate the work of the district. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Byrd. Ms. Bowman?
Could you, I used to have this number, and I don't know if you said how many students are in not our cyber charter, but outside. So it looks like it costs about a little less than $4,000 a student when someone's in district. What is it when they're out of district at a cyber charter?
I think you have.
I meant to say per student. I might have said per month, but so
It's there, regular
Okay.
education student,
475.
in the
Okay,
current
so
year,
13.
12,816,
Yeah.
and a special education student, 29,592.
Okay. That's if they go out, and so then if they stay in, we're paying about 4,000 for the IU's program.
Per student.
Yes, it really does vary depending on the number of courses that the student has and the type of courses that the student is enrolled in. And we're continually looking at what we're offering and how we could do it in a more effective way. So down the road, it could look differently. We've looked at credit recovery courses in a different way than we have previously to try to reduce some cost, and making sure that we're not over-enrolling students in courses and setting them up for failure and setting us up for a higher invoice at the end of the marking period.
I mean, I'm not complaining about what we're spending on our in-house program. I'm just seeing that there's a huge difference between what we're spending here and what we have to spend if a student leaves. What I think Mr. Byrd was asking is, do we do exit interviews for families who leave the district so we can understand why they left? Or, you know, I imagine some of them are going for a different experience. For example, if they're going to charter arts, they're looking for something that's just not offered here, and that's fine. But do we have families who are leaving for reasons that we could actually overcome, and if we knew what those reasons were?
I think that's a really valid point, and that's some of the work that I hope we can begin to implement. I think the first step for us and for our program when I came on board was just to evaluate why are students leaving our brick and mortar and entering our program. What do our numbers look like from a district as far as how many we are losing to charters and cybers? And now with a campaign to try to bring some back, in addition to that, we have to add the layer of as we lose students, can we find out more information about what's going on?
Thank you.
But, and we do, and I will say a point of pride for our program is that we do hold students accountable in our online program. And so sometimes students do flee to cyber charters because they can become a little more anonymous and it's hard to track attendance. And I know that cyber charters most attempt to do that. But we are very intentional about holding student attendance improvement conferences with families. We're very intentional about following the truancy process if we need to, always in a collaborative way where we're trying to be solution-focused instead of punitively focused. But when students enter our program or families enter our program, they know that they can't hide that they're still accountable for their students' education. And, I can't speak to what happens on the other end when they leave our district, but sometimes families make that choice because of attendance.
I'm really happy to see the work that you're doing here. It's been something that we as a board have been asking for quite a long time, and it sounds like it's really coming together and moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else from the board? Well, I'd just like to add again, thank you for another informative installment of the what's going into our budget process. Certainly, if we have additional questions, we'll reach out, but otherwise, we look forward to part 4. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is personnel. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye. Thank you. I believe Dr. Campbell has some comments before we move on.
I do. This is as we enter the spring, we will begin to see retirements. And so I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that between the two employees who are retiring, Sherry Rose and Ken Stefanik, they represent 55 years of dedicated service in the East Penn School District. So that's a tremendous career, and certainly wish them both well. Sherry has spent much of her time at West Coastville Elementary as an elementary teacher, and Ken Stefanik is retiring from Albertus Elementary, although I will say he and I had some great time working together when he was at Lincoln when I was there as well. So wish them both continued happiness in their retirement.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Next is business operations. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A, B, and C together. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next is curriculum. First item, item A, is with regard to a second reading of the proposed district student-teacher calendar for 23-24. It's my understanding that there were no changes for the second reading and that we are in line to vote for it at our next meeting on the 13th. Are there any questions or comments from the board for the administration on the calendar? Okay, thank you. Next meeting, as I mentioned, March 13th, we'll be having our third reading and vote. Item B under curriculum is educational conferences. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Falegi.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next is policy. We have a third reading for the set of policies that were under revision. I don't believe there are any updates for this final reading. Are there any additional questions or concerns from the board? Okay, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Falegi.
Aye.
Actually, I didn't get a motion yet. May I have a motion to approve the policies for third reading?
So move.
Second.
All right, thank you for keeping me honest. No additional comments or questions. Let's go ahead and take the roll, Ms. Allen.
Mr. Falegi.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Dr. Whitney.
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to other educational entities, we have a report on CLIU from Dr. Whitney.
Yes, so CLIU met last on January 25th. That meeting was moved to a virtual meeting because of inclement weather, and so a couple of presentations that were expected on cybersecurity in the IU and on the CLIU toy adaptation program. Those were moved to the March meeting, so I'll have something to say on those next time. So not much to report, fairly brief. A new board member from the Panther Valley District. Currently, there is no board member from the Allentown District. That representative resigned, and there hasn't been a replacement yet. Some personnel items, one really of note, the manager of transportation for the IU has been serving as the state mandated safety and security coordinator since 2019, and the board approved a one-time stipend payment to her as essentially recognition of doing that extra work during that time without an actual adjustment in salary. That stipend was taken from health and safety grant funds, so no effect to the bottom line budget. And then we reviewed the health and safety plan for the IU, and a 6-month interval is required. No changes from the previous or existing plan, so that was reviewed without any comment. And that is my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitney. Are there any questions? All right, thank you again. Next is a report from the LCTI JOC meeting. Mr. Champagne?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Levinson. The Joint Operating Committee of LCTI met on February 22nd in a hybrid mode. Key takeaways, Joseph Paragon, who's one of the teachers in the IT Academy focusing on web design, was honored by the Pennsylvania Association of Education and Technology with the Arrow Davidson Award. It really focuses on excellence and service in the field. The award's been around for many, many years. He's one of the teachers who typically has students that are doing very well in some of the competitions in Skills USA. Speaking of Skills USA, we honored all of the award winners, and as Dr. Campbell has previously talked about, a number of them. I won't go into all of the individuals, but we did have 6 first-place winners, 2 second-place winners, and 4 third-place winners at the district competition. The comprehensive plan was approved by the JOC following the stakeholder review on February 13th. The key elements of that plan include a focus on equity and inclusion, the student career workplace experience, really focusing on getting all students in the workplace in some level, and then engagement with local industry to facilitate, the programs that we need. We're due to submit the plan to PDE in March. February is one day left, CTE month, and so they talked about some video clips that are on Instagram for people to take a look at the programs that LCTI offers and all developed by students. So it's really quite interesting. So take a look at those if you are an Instagram fan. School Counselor Week was held between February 6th and 10th, getting all the sending districts counselors involved in the programs and understanding the programs that LCTI offers. 5th grade tours are scheduled for May. We anticipate 3,700 students within the county. to take advantage of that, and I think that's a great thing to get people exposed to LCTI and what it can offer at a very early age. And then, speaking of just the process of enrollment, we've gone to a virtual process this year, and so far that whole program is doing very well. We've got over 250 or 260 applicants already, and over 1,000 in process. And then Senior Recognition Night is again scheduled for May 31st at the PPL Center, so just a reminder on that. And that really concludes my report, other than the budget, which we'll be talking about momentarily.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Any questions on his report? Okay. The next three items we're going to take separately. Each item is for us to approve the general operating budgets for the CLIU, first CLIU, then LCTI, then L-Tri-C. I'm sorry, CLIU, L-Tri-C, then LCTI. Thank you. So we're going to take these separately. First is the CLIU general operating budget for 23-24. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments on the CLIU budget that we had an opportunity to review? Okay. Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. The next one is item D, the L-Tri-C 23-24 operating and capital budgets. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Ann Thompson would normally be here to talk to us about the L-Tri-C budget. Unfortunately, she could not make it this evening. If there are any questions, I suppose you could pose them to the administration. Okay. Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Lastly is the LCTI 23-24 General Operating and Academic Center Funds Budget. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Champagne, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, if there are any
Open?
questions, I'd be happy to answer. I mean, and as Mr. Saul alluded to, many of the same kind of cost drivers that we are facing, so is LCTI with respect to salary escalations, health benefits, again, going up 11%. We did hire one new teacher for this coming budget cycle as an English second language position that will be split cost sharing between the general fund and the academic center. We have been able to keep the increase to less than the adjusted Act 1 index, 3.5% to members. Our actual budget went up primarily because our enrollment's gone up. You know, our enrollment drives our costs, and we've had an increase in our 5-year average student enrollment, as well as the increase in property values, which then sets the amount of cost that we bear for debt service and capital. Similar drivers on the academic center side, increase in salaries and health benefits, and again, an increase in cost to us because of the number of students taking advantage of the program. So those are the key drivers. But if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Champagne? All right, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
9 ayes.
I'd just like to say in closing that I'm very happy that we were able to unanimously approve each of these budgets. I will mention the CLIU, L-Tri-C, and LCTI are great partners in how we educate the students in our district. Obviously, CLIU and LCTI for students that are already in the district, and L-Tri-C after they leave and move on to whatever else they're doing in their careers. So again, I'm grateful for their participation in helping educate our students, and I'm happy that we are able to be a part of that. There are no other items. There are 2 announcements. The first is we had an executive session tonight where we talked about personnel and litigation. Our next board meeting is in 2 weeks, on Monday, March 13th, here in the boardroom at 7:30 PM. With no other business, I may have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Please drive safely when you're going home.